really often see the teal mask variant as well. But I think Ogerpon Cornerstone on the right team can provide you a lot of benefit, whether it is going to be next to something like the Farigiraf as Dill gets into this very first game to help kind of redirect away attacks so you can guarantee the Trick Room, or you force this Heatran to go for the Terrestrialization and try to hit it another way.
Yeah, and we got the Heatran and the Landorus leading out for Ashton, and this is just a complete throwback. I haven't seen this lead for years and years.
It makes me happy.
It used to be such a solid lead to be able to go for. They cover each other very well except for Watertight, and that's what the Wellspring Ogerpon is from this team, but we've got it facing down the Cornerstone at the moment, and you've got the Intimidate into Ogerpon as well, and yeah, the Farigiraf could be able to set up Trick Room here, but there could be something just like a U-turn from the Landorus to reposition, while also actually doing really good damage to either of these Pokemon with that super effective hit, and the Heatran isn't as threatened, especially because the Ogerpon switching out. There's no threat into the Heatran at the moment, just going to be the Incineroar switching in instead.
Okay, so the Incineroar is going to help land an Intimidate drop onto this Choice Band Landorus. It will help to kind of put a little bit of the pressure off of that Pokemon, but you're still in a bit of danger. Protect here is actually going to stop this Landorus from being able to pivot out. It gives Dill the opportunity to go for something like a Fake Out on the next turn. And Incineroar ends up being the perfect switch in for the Heat Wave that this Heatran is just unleashed, and in fact it's so good that it doesn't even take the attack.
I'm calling that a delayed commentator's curse from you when you mentioned about the fact that Heatwave can miss, but it would have done very, very little damage to the Assault Vest Incineroar, so probably won't be too impactful there. The Incineroar and switching in and Protect is very, very nice because you both get rid of the Intimidate on the Cornerstone Ogerpon while also seeing what the Landorus did lock into. Yes, it could have gone for a Stomping Tantrum into the Incineroar switch in, but now that you know it's gone for that U-turn, it's not threatening any damage into this Incineroar. It's going to be just pivoting out. And yes, it's still very respectable damage into that Farigiraf, but it's able to survive that very comfortably.
It does, but I mean, that is still going to be a lot, bringing that Farigiraf to basically about half, but just barely out of the range that it actually can't consume the Citrus Berry and get any of that additional HP recovery back. So is this follow-up attack from the Heatran actually going to be enough to knock it out? Heatran does go for it, but no, it is going to be safe for now. Farigiraf finally gets a chance to eat that berry. So that will be able to help give it a little bit more staying power as we see the U-turn from the Incineroar get a nice target with the Ogerpon Wellspring that switched in.
Yeah, that's going to be some really nice chip damage into that. And you've got to assume this is the Ursaluna switching in the face of the Heatran to be there. You can't bring Torkoal in this matchup against Heatran. Yep, there we go. There's the Ursaluna. And we saw the Incineroar moving before that Farigiraf. That has yet to move, and there is that Trick Room setup.
Trick Room is going to be great. Ursaluna also coming in off the U-turn means that it's going to get that Flame Orb activated immediately. So Guts on the table to boost up this Ursaluna's attack.
Yeah, now it's going to be able to threaten some really nice damage. It can go for the Earthquake in the face of the Heatran, which might force its defensive terrestrialization of Grass. But if you do that, then suddenly you're not resisting Hyper Voice that can come out from Farigiraf anymore. You're not resisting the Facade, and if you get some Earthquake chip damage into that Heatran, I think that would probably still put it in range of a Facade afterwards. And the Ogerpon, after taking so much damage from that U-turn, might be in range of an Earthquake and a Hyper Voice. You could be going for a defensive terrestrialization of the flying on the Farigiraf so that you become immune to those Earthquakes. And then there wouldn't be too much stopping just a Hyper Voice and Earthquake. Yes, you'd have to go for that defensive terrestrialization with the Heatran, but instead, nope, just Farigiraf switching out here instead, not going on the offensive. It's going to be Incineroar, and you definitely are not going for Earthquake this turn because of that.
No, you don't want to be getting that additional damage into the partner, especially because Incineroar has been able to be pretty effective already, even just being able to help drop the attack stat of this Ogerpon Wellspring. You can see Dill kind of like doing a little nod over there with that Protect from the Heatran. Ashton's definitely trying to stall out a couple of these turns of Trick Room, and with this Ursaluna being just as big of a threat as it is, we were seeing just Ashton hoping to kind of hedge his bets. Where is this Ursaluna going to target? Can I stall out more turns of Trick Room before I really have to hit full send on the Terra?
Yeah, well, you can't really stop a Fake Out into Heatran and Facade into that Ogerpon slot. Yes, you did get a tiny bit of chip damage with that Spiked Shield. That does always add up when Ursaluna is getting that extra damage from the burn. You can go for a switch in with the Landorus, and I would assume with the Intimidate that would be able to survive a Facade, but that would be a lot of damage on the way in. The Ogerpon is surely in range of even a -1 Facade, so even if the Landorus switched in for the Heatran instead, that would be in range. So it's probably got to be that Landorus switch in for that Ogerpon to try and stall out these last few turns of Trick Room.
I don't hate it though, because I'm kind of taking a look at the rest of what Dill has brought to this game, and I wonder how important this Landorus is going to be in terms of damage in the long run. Ogerpon, if it stays healthy and Trick Room expires, can still do the same type of super effective damage that you would hope for from the Landorus, if not better. And so Ashton sees this opportunity with the Intimidate drops onto both of these physical attackers to go ahead and use that terrestrialization, hoping to get the right call here for the damage that Dill has used.
And that tiny bit of damage from U-turn might put the Landorus in range of a facade. It will depend on how key Ashton has trained his Landorus. Maybe you go for full bulk to really benefit from that Intimidate that you can get as well, or maybe you're relying on Intimidate to be fine and then you just go for full on the offense. But no, oh wow, it was Earthquake. That's gone totally wrong for Dill. It's going to KO his own Farigiraf and not do too much damage to this now Grass Terror Heatran.
Okay then, well that was definitely not what I expected either, because you are sacrificing your own Pokemon, but Dill must see something that we don't. Unfortunately though, this Flash Cannon is able to find its mark in the critical hit, and you can see both of them kind of laughing about it, but at least Dill can be in a bit of good spirits with what has just happened on this turn. It was not very much in Dill's favor, the outcome that we just saw.
Yeah, the reason you would go for that is you predict the Heatran not to go for a Terra Grass, expecting a Facade to predict the Terra Grass. That would be the main reasoning by going for the Earthquake. And that would have also been calling that the Ogerpon is staying in, because a U-turn would have done very good damage, and that would have put the Ogerpon in range of an Earthquake. And yes, you're sacrificing your Farigiraf on the way in, but if there is no defensive Terra from the Heatran, and the Ogerpon and Heatran just stay in, then that would have been a double KO. But there were multiple ways that Ashton could have got around that. The defensive Terra of the Grass did make perfect sense, and by switching in the Landorus, it would have survived a Facade even if that Terra had been called. So overall, a very safe play from Ashton, and really punishing this really aggressive play that didn't work out for Dill on this turn.
But do we call that a coin flip, or do we call that a roll of a d20? Because there were a lot of different factors that went into that turn, but you're right. If Dill gets the call right, that is a game win for Dill. But unfortunately now, a bit of a back against the wall situation. Flare Blitz, though, is going to be a KO into that Wellspring Ogerpon. So Dill is able to get one Pokemon KO on the board. It's a 3v3 now, as we still see the final turn of Trick Room have to play out. Facade not able to hit its mark, but I feel like with this now, with kind of like lesser options here for Ashton to kind of play around with, Dill has a few more routes that they can actually take. Yeah,
with Trick Room stalled out now, we're seeing the Urshifu join the field, and that means you can't go for any protects to try and pivot around and get around this. The Ursaluna is so low that it's in range of any attack that Ashton would want to go for, and we got the Ogerpon waiting in the back. And of course, Trick Room can't be set up. The Farigiraf's already been KO'd, so Ashton is always going to have the speed advantage against these two Pokemon. Yes, the Cornerstone Ogerpon could be run max speed and outspeed everything that is available for Ashton's side of the field, but I think that given how disastrously wrong that previous turn went, and the fact that Ashton has now stalled out Trick Room, I don't think there's going to be too much stopping him if he just makes the right offensive plays here to be able to sweep through this first game.
One option here is we saw Ashton double target into the Ursaluna. So the way that that works is with Sucker Punch, you kind of hope that that's going to be the thing that actually gets the KO first. And then the attack from the Heatran is going to redirect into the partner that's going to be sitting next to it. So Sucker Punch, a KO. Incineroar is actually going to move first, and it's going to do a good chunk to this Urshifu, but still probably not enough to get Dill back into this game, as Earth Power is going to almost clean up the rest of that.
Without the Assault Vest, but the Assault Vest is keeping itself safe there. Don't think that particularly matters too much there. Yeah, the last turn of Trick Room stalled out the Sucker Punch necessary to be able to pick up that last bit of damage on the opposing Ursaluna. And yeah, you've got the Ogerpon now. It's still got its sturdy intact, but the Incineroar's in range of any attack now that Ashton would want to go for. I don't think the Ogerpon's going to be able to take this 3v1, especially with the Landorus waiting in the back, ready to get an Intimidate down onto it.
And there aren't many ways that I think Dill would be able to do enough damage to this Heatran. You know, Flare Blitz is off the table. You do have knockoff, and U-turn would be doing super effective damage, but after a while, you are just going to have to find ways to deal with everything else. And you're right, that Landorus is that sneaky ace in the hole that Ashton has been able to hold onto for the remainder of this first game, and that's going to give him the edge to be able to close this out. So we see here, Dill kind of like taking their time. You do get the Power Whip KO into the Urshifu, so at least solves one of your problems, but you can use the rest of this time to start thinking about what's going to happen for this second game.
Yeah, we've seen the Earth Power come out from the Heatran. Nothing wrong with that at all. If the Ogerpon had gone for a follow me to keep it safe, then it would have dropped to an Earth Power and a close combat combination for sure. So I don't think there was particularly any way out for Dill at this point. I guess that because Ivy Cudgel has an increased critical hit rate, that's got to be the only thing that can happen now. And I don't think that we've seen the Terra come out from Dill just yet. So you could still go for that offensive rock terrestrialization on the Ogerpon. And I think it would still have to be 2 critical hits, though, to be able to pick up the KO. But then if you go for that, then you're making yourself lose your sturdy, and then potentially Flash Cannon will be able to pick up that KO either.
Exactly, and I think that no matter what, you're really hoping that you get 2 hits. Spiky Shield still buying some time. Landorus actually does get a little bit of recoil because that move that it selected ends up making contact, and that might help make something a little more comfortable. So I think you have to hope that this Ivy Cudgel does get the crit. You are able to knock out the Heatran, and there's one. So maybe this Ogerpon with the speed advantage against this Landorus can actually bring Dill back into this. But it comes down to what this Landorus is going to do. It is going to be the Stomping Tantrum. It is going to do a decent chunk to this Ogerpon. But maybe what it requires is another Spiky Shield to get a little bit more chip into the Landorus. And then you go for the Ivy Cudgel. But Dill says, no, I don't need the Sturdy anymore. I'm not at full HP. I'm going to go ahead and expend that Terrestrialization to get that increased boost of damage to my Ivy Cudgel. And maybe that is going to be what puts Dill's damage over the edge to get the KO onto the Landorus. Oh my goodness, fingers crossed, Ivy Cudgel comes out from the Ogerpon, and even when Dill has been so many turns behind, that doesn't get the crit, and so the game still goes Ashton's way. Yeah,
the fact that that could have been taken by Dill, if there would have been the second critical hit, is really, really impressive. After that absolutely disastrous Earthquake on their own for Farigarath, that was just, I thought it was curtains for sure, but they got themselves back into the game. Very, very nicely done. Finding the win condition. It didn't come through, but being able to recognize it has to be a double critical hit, both into the Heatran and then into the Landorus. Very, very nicely recognized, and not quite putting through here, but that's just showing why they were able to make that finals in the previous EUIC.
Exactly. I mean, what a great display of comeback potential. And there we come back to that turn, right? That Farigarath did have to be kind of that sacrificial giraffe as it comes back in. But I think, as you had so correctly called out, with the sequence of events that could have happened in that turn, if Ashton had made a couple of different decisions, and that's what Dill was banking on, Dill could win that first game and not make it so close and come down to the wire at the end, needing a critical hit to get there.
Yeah, I think leaving the Cornerstone Ogerpon waiting in the back made perfect sense. It was led for Dill, and then was just switched out straight away into the Incineroar, and then was able to be preserved, and it outsped every single Pokemon that Ashton had available. Of course, it might speed up with the Ogerpon Wellspring that Ashton does have, but then it did have that option to be able to go for those Ivy Cudgels, and it really came down to the wire.
What a great match that we have upon us. Ashton Cox, 2-time LAIC champion, is going to be leading this best-of-3 series with that first game win. But Dill, that runner-up in EUIC 2025, has a chance to come back into this. That's why we love having these best-of-3 matches. And what do you think might happen for this next one?
I'm just wondering if there's a space for the Flutter Mane coming out from Dill. I don't think you can bring Torkoal. Like, against Heatran, Heatran always wins. It's got its Flash Fire. It's completely immune to the Torkoal. Maybe you only bring the Torkoal so that you can boost up the Flutter Mane with its Photosynthesis, and then that might allow a sweep through the Heatran. Like, it's two-shot by Shadow Ball very, very comfortably. And yeah, we are seeing that adaptation. It's going to be that Flutter Mane coming out paired with the Incineroar for Dill, and then there is still that Heatran, but it's going to be Urshifu-led instead for Ashton.
And if that Torkoal isn't back, I wonder if that's going to be a speed or special attack boost. I have to imagine that the Photosynthesis boost is going to give you the additional special attack, just kind of based on the trends that we have seen for Flutter Mane that are carrying choice specs. But you never know with these kinds of things. But as of right now, Flutter Mane is still a very naturally fast Pokemon. Doesn't need something like a booster speed or even a speed boost from Photosynthesis to get the edge over an Urshifu or Heatran.
Yeah, I'm not really seeing too much downsides to a double protect here. You both stall out a turn of Fake Out, and you get to see what the Flutter Mane would lock itself into. So yeah, we're seeing the Detect from the Urshifu, almost certainly going to be that follow-up from the Heatran, and just basically a dead turn coming out for Dill. but then Ashton gets that information of what has this Flutter Mane locked itself into.
The choice specs is going to make this Flutter Mane a little bit easier to play around. While it does dish out big damage, the downside of the choice specs is that you are locked into the first move that you choose. And so now Ashton has a lot of information to move forward with in this game too.
Yeah, and we saw it was locked into the Dazzling Gleam, so that's going to threaten the Urshifu rather than the Heatran. So this Heatran is incredibly safe on the field at the moment. Dazzling Gleam does very, very negligible damage to a Heatran with its prod resistance. And yes, you can go for a knockoff and get rid of the Citrus Berry, or you can go for a U-turn to get that repositioning ready for a fake out in the future. But Ashton needs to make the decision. You may lose the Urshifu to a double up of a Dazzling Gleam and a U-turn, and that seems like what Ashton is comfortable with here, because of course that Dazzling Gleam bring the Urshifu down to its focus slash, so it's probably only going to be able to get one attack off in this game.
Yeah, 1 HP and a dream for this Urshifu as it does get a chance to go for the close combat. That is so much, and we saw just how well this Incineroar was able to tank that Urge power thanks to the Assault Vest in that first game, but the Heatran is going to outspeed it, and that is going to be a double up to get the knockout onto the Incineroar, so Dill doesn't get a follow-up on a KO onto this Urshifu. It can still be around this next turn to go for something like a Sucker Punch.
Yeah, absolutely can. And obviously Dazzling Gleam will for sure knock out this Urshifu. Now it's down to its focus sash, and it would have to be Sucker Punch to be able to get off some last minute damage, but maybe it's the Frigoraph that's going to come in ready to set up the Trick Room with the Ursaluna, and if that's the case, then you can't Sucker Punch because of the Armor Tail, so then the Urshifu would for sure be KO'd. But if you bring in the Frigoraph, you are not threatening this Heatran in the slightest, and it would just be free to just go on the offense, assuming with the Heat Waves rather than the Flash Cannon, because Flash Cannon doesn't knock out a Flutter Mane in one shot, so you'd probably want the extra chip damage onto it instead. But no, it's not even the Frigoraph, it's going to be the Ogerpon instead, so that's actually going to be able to threaten some pretty good damage into this Heatran. You've got the Dazzling Gleam available, and then you can follow up with an Ivy Cudgel. That would do some very respectable damage. It does allow this Urshifu to get one last attack off with its Sucker Punch, though, if it does choose to do so.
Then does this Ogerpon actually try to go for some damage? With the Rock-type Ivy Cudgel, it may actually kind of force this Heatran's hand. Do you want to try to expand the Terrestrialization here? Maybe that helps this Flutter Mane get a bit more of a cleanup? Or is this something that Ashton says, you know what, my Heatran has actually already done quite a bit in this matchup. Maybe I want to save the Terrestrialization for something that I have in the back. But it starts in this game too, Dill getting back on the board with a KO. Sucker Punch is going to be good.
Oh,
it actually gets the crit.
Damage.
And even though it has the sturdy ability, it would have been knocked out. You take a look at this Ogerpon and you realize there is an attack coming out here. Ashton did not go for a Terrestrialization. So I have to imagine this is going to be the Ivy Cudgel coming out from this Ogerpon. It's going to be a KO to the Urshifu, a nice chunk of damage into this Heatran to at least get it to expend the Citrus Berry. But it's going to still be a pretty uphill battle here as Heatran is going to follow up this Ogerpon with a Flash Cannon to knock it out.
Yeah, not risking the shaky accuracy. Another critical hit as well. That one was definitely not necessary. That Ogerpon was going down to the Flash Cannon. But yeah, not risking the accuracy. Like we've established, Heatran does not care about this Flutter Mane in the slightest. It's okay to take another probably 10 Dazzling Gleams, so it doesn't need to get that extra chip damage necessarily straight away to be able to KO. It can deal with it whenever it wants in the future, so long as we just take care of this last Pokemon on Dill's side of the field, which of course had to be the Ursaluna. There's no way you're not bringing Ursaluna against a Heatran, but there's no Trick Room. And well, there was a potential of a Trick Room on the Flutter Mane, of course, but it's locked into its Dazzling Gleam now instead. So yeah, there's Ursaluna, and it's been intimidated, and it's not got its Flame Orb, so it's just really not going to be able to do the damage. At least you've got the pin of, well, if you Terrestrialize to avoid an Earthquake or a Headlong Rush KO, then you're still going to be taking some very good damage from Dazzling Gleam. I think that's the only saving grace for Dill at this point. But the fact that you've been intimidated, you're not going to be able to do that much damage to the opposing Landorus. It's going to be able to survive a Dazzling Gleam and a Facade for sure this turn. And it's got its choice band. It might even be able to KO this Flutter Mane. You do still have Terrestrialization available. Stomping Tantrum probably wouldn't do it, but the Flying Terror available on the Terra Blast with the Landorus, that would get the extra damage boost, and that probably would be able to pick up the knockout.
I'm here for it. I love Terraflying Terra Blast on Bandorus. It is one of my favorite combinations to see, but I'm still thinking about if there is a way, if there is an out that I might be able to start to work towards. That game one was very close, even when it looked like Dill was really in the back foot. But now that we've entered into this game two, we see this Terrestrialization expended. It is going to just be that Terra Fury to boost up these Dazzling Gleams. It was a little bit of glitter the first time onto this Heatran, but it does look a bit more powerful as the Stomping Tantrum is going to stop this Flutter Mane in its tracks. That is going to be the last Dazzling Gleam it gets a chance to use in this game number 2. It might be it for Dill in this game. Flash Cannon to follow it up from the Heatran is going to start to whittle away at this Ursaluna, but Ursaluna is going to start to whittle away at itself with these defense drops.
Yeah, I think that even if Ashton was down to just the Landorus, it would be able to take this game, because based on the fact that it did just one-shot the Flutter Mane, not even with the Terra Blast that's even stronger than Stomping Tantrum would be, those drops that has come out from the Headlong Rush would have been able to do it. But there is, of course, the Ogapon waiting in the back, so there is definitely nothing that Dill can do. This is just going to be an Ivy Cudgel and a Stomping Tantrum. Ursaluna cannot survive either of those attacks at this point, and Ashton is going to be able to take down our previous international finalist.
Ivy Cudgel is going to do it. Dill is going to allow us to see that final KO. Another critical hit at the end there. Yeah, you know, we've just seen so many at this point, but it will not have mattered to be able to seal the deal. Congratulations to Ashton Cox, going to win Swiss round number 4 to keep a 4-0 record heading into the last half of our Phase 1 Swiss rounds.
It seems like they're coming back. The combination of Landorus